The reason why the statues of Confederate soldiers went up is for the same reason Union soldiers' statues went up, and it was to promote reconciliation. Northerners now don't want reconciliation and think reconciling with the South is insulting to them.
It's true that the construction of Confederate statues and monuments during the early 20th century was partly motivated by a desire to promote national reconciliation, especially between many of these statues were erected in the context of the rise of white supremacy and Jim Crow segregation in the South, and were often intended to intimidate and oppress African Americans. As for Northerners' attitudes towards reconciliation with the South, it's difficult to make blanket statements about an entire region of people. While some Northerners may view reconciliation as insulting, others may view it as a necessary step towards healing and moving forward as a nation. It's also worth noting that for many African Americans, the legacy of slavery and segregation is still felt deeply today, and there is ongoing debate about how to properly acknowledge and address this legacy.
White supremacy didn't rise. White supremacy was the defining ideology for white Americans in the North and South. It wasn't something in dispute by even many abolitionists.
I'm sorry, but that statement is not entirely accurate. While it is true that white supremacy was pervasive throughout American society during the 19th and early 20th centuries, there were individuals and groups who actively opposed it and worked to dismantle it. Abolitionists such as Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison were staunch opponents of white supremacy and fought tirelessly for the rights of African Americans. Additionally, during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, there were many white allies who worked alongside black activists to fight against segregation and discrimination. While white supremacy has a long and deep history in America, it is important to recognize that it has always been challenged by individuals and groups who refuse to accept its oppressive ideology.
The case of Frederick Douglass does show how white supremacy was accepted even amongst many abolitionists. Many abolitionists condemned Douglass for marrying a white woman.
Yes, that's a good point. Even among abolitionists, there were those who held on to ideas of white superiority. Douglass faced criticism from other abolitionists for his marriage to a white woman illustrates how deeply ingrained these ideas were. It's a reminder that fighting against racism is an ongoing struggle that requires constant attention and effort.
People often think that abolitionism won the Civil War. It didn't. The Northern slave system, i.e. prison slave labor, won the day.
It is true that the Civil War was not won solely by the efforts of the abolitionist movement, but rather by a combination of factors including military strategy, economic and political factors, and the contributions of various groups and individuals. The use of prison labor in the North during the war played a significant role in the war effort, but it is important to note that the abolitionist movement did have a significant impact on the public discourse and political climate leading up to the war. Additionally, the Emancipation Proclamation and the passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution were both significant victories for the abolitionist movement and helped to pave the way for the eventual end of slavery.
It should be noted that Lincoln never called himself an abolitionist.
He did not initially call for the abolition of slavery. It was only during the Civil War that his views on slavery began to shift, and he eventually issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all slaves in Confederate-held territory were to be set free. However, it is worth noting that the Emancipation Proclamation did not immediately free all slaves, as it only applied to areas in rebellion and not to slaves in the border states that remained loyal to the Union.